Welcome to my channel, Edible Thoughts Makes. My name is Stephanie, and this channel is where I share with you my works in progress, finished projects, things I'm cooking up, books I'm reading, funny things my kids may say. My hope is that as you watch this episode and the previous episodes, that you find some inspiration along the way. It is the middle of May, year 2022, and spring has finally sprung. In fact, one day it felt like spring was skipped over in a week and it was summer. It was just one day that was really hot, but I feel like it's relative, right? Just a month ago we were still getting snow and the ground was still frozen solid, but finally we have started planting, the risk of frost is over, and it is so nice to see everything start greening up. I feel like oftentimes we just need a really good rain or a couple good soakings and everything just turns this fluorescent green, and things that didn't seem like they were really awake before all of a sudden have grown 3 inches overnight. It's incredible and it's such a good feeling, and the sunshine feels warm. To walk out on the pavers with bare feet where it is nice and warm, and it just feels good to get your hands in the dirt again and to breathe that spring air. And if you have allergies, it may not feel great, but yeah, it's still lovely outside. We are on episode, I think it's 85, and I am just so excited that you are here spending some time with me today. I do have a couple of projects to share with you. I think there might be more sewing projects than knitting ones this time. I don't know, I didn't really count, but I'm excited to just sit down and chat with you today. I had jotted down some notes so I don't forget things, but as always, I oftentimes just run off into other tangents, and sometimes when I'm done recording I think, oh no, there was something else I wanted to say. So I mean, that's just how conversations go, right? Our daughter, so I have 2 daughters, a 3rd grader and a kindergartner, and I can hardly believe that the school year is almost over. We go until June, early mid-June, and so there's not a lot of time left for this school year. The 3rd grader has been really excited about doing some weaving in her class. They have this loom, and the teacher has lots of buckets of yarn. I asked her if they, I asked my daughter if she thought the teacher wanted some donations of yarn. She goes, no mom, she has a lot. Needless to say, she said that there were plenty of colors to choose from for all the kids to do their weavings, so that was really cool. Our younger one, our kindergartner, had a piece in the school district art show, and so that was really neat. I didn't get to go because the kids both had after-school activities at the same time that particular day, so I took the older one, my husband took the younger one, but she was so proud. It was nice to see the pictures that my husband had taken. She had this like ceramic medallion that she had made with these imprints of different shapes on it, and it was glazed, and it was pretty cool. So that's what's exciting happening for the kids. As far as the garden goes, let's see, we just planted a lot of stuff from seed this year. Usually we have something started, not usually by us, we'll buy them from somewhere because we don't have grow lights, and the winters are just so dark that unless I feel like you invest in grow lights, that the effort may not be entirely worth it. At least in the past for us, I feel like we've tried it and it just doesn't, they just don't look very lively. I don't know, and the transplant process doesn't always go very well either. So we are actually starting a lot of stuff from seed this year. We just planted a ton of zinnias. If you were around last summer, we had tons of zinnias. We had one zinnia bush that grew to maybe 5 feet tall. It was one of those, like, what is it called, cut and grow or something? The more you cut, the more it flourishes. And we just always had a bouquet of zinnias on the table. And so we planted more zinnias, different varieties from different seed packets. We also planted, I think, 2 varieties of lettuce, maybe 2 varieties of bok choy, some radishes, onions, and what else? I can't remember what else, carrots maybe? But as far as perennials go, what's exciting that's coming back are the clematis, which are these beautiful purple flowers. It's viney, so we have it growing along the garden wall for the vegetable garden. The vegetable garden we have, the vegetable garden we have fenced off because we do get bunnies and wildlife that likes to eat everything. So that part we are using the fence there for the clematis, which did get eaten some last summer, so we'll have to see how it does this summer. It seems to be getting a pretty strong hold to the fence right now without being completely chopped down yet, so maybe it's past that danger zone. I don't know. Tulips are finally coming up. So one area of the garden, they've been completely demolished by the bunnies or the deer. I'm not sure which one is guilty, but we have another section where we had planted tulips, and those seem to be thriving. So they don't seem to have found it yet. The bulbs are still, I mean not bulbs, the buds. Is it a tulip bud? I don't know, like right before it flowers. Most things are called buds, but I feel like buds are usually smaller, so I don't know what you call that. Well, anyway, the tulips look like they might bloom by like next week or so, so let's hope they last until then and continue to not be found by the deer and the bunnies. Daffodils, we had like some mini ones that bloomed and then one bigger one, but we don't seem to have a lot of luck with our daffodils. And then the peonies, those are growing so fast. I feel like once they get started, they literally grow inches overnight. It's incredible. So we had to put up the plant supports. I feel like we always put those up too late. So we always try to get them in as soon as we see the peonies coming up just because they grow so fast. And peonies are my favorite flowers. I love all the colors. Peonies were the main flowers in our wedding, and they always bloom in June, which is our anniversary month, our wedding anniversary month. And so there's special memories with that, and I have an uncle who has grown peonies for decades, and his peony bushes are incredible. They're huge, and they just bloom, bloom, bloom. And my parents have grown peonies as well, different varieties, and so peonies hold a very special place in my heart, and I look forward to them blooming every year. It is so special. And yeah, I think that's everything for the garden. I forgot to mention earlier that links to what I talk about going forward, I don't think I have any links for the garden, but well, maybe I'll link to where we got a lot of our vegetable seeds this year, and yeah, that link will be down there. But I try to put links in the description box below this video to things that I talk about. I will link to designer websites, and that usually can take you to their social medias, where to buy their patterns, things like that. And then I do use Ravelry, so I will have a separate section for my Ravelry project pages, and that will be clearly marked in case Ravelry is not an accessible site to you, so just then don't click on it, but it will be clearly marked that that's what those are. And what else? All my videos have captioning provided, so you just click on that CC button there. I use the automatic YouTube captioning, and then I go back and edit it so that it makes sense. My videos are usually split up in chapters where I have the vlog in the beginning that, you know, shows you kind of what's going on in the last couple of weeks, and then we kind of chit chat a little bit, catch up, and then I jump into finished projects, and then works in progress, and then an eats and reads section. So those have timestamps also in the description box below this video, so you can jump around if you need to, or watch a little, come back, or whatever, looking for something to make it easier for you. But it also does make it easier for me if I'm like going back looking for something in the future. So I think that is it. So with that, grab a beverage. I have an iced coffee today, decaf, with a little bit of maple syrup and soy milk, and so good. The weather is definitely warming up. I think today we might get up to 78, which I think for a lot of us here feel like it's super hot, especially when it's been so chilly. But yeah, let's jump right in. Okay, the first finished project I would like to share with you is the one that I'm wearing, although I'm wearing two of them. So this is the Sonder jumper by, I think she just calls it Sonder. by Wei Qian of the Petite Knitter. And I'm trying to find a place to put my notebook there. Here it is. I'm way too close to the camera to really give you a full view of it. I'm afraid that if I move it, I'm going to run into trouble here, but maybe I'll move it back later. So it is a long sleeve pullover. You can really modify it however way you want to. The pattern gives you a bracelet length sleeve and then a full length sleeve. And I initially was planning on doing a bracelet length sleeve, but I had the yarn, so I just decided to knit it all the way down. The pattern is written for a DK weight. I decided I wanted to knit it in a fingering weight, and I knit a ton of different swatches. I think I knit like 4 or 5 different swatches, which I was okay with because I knew that this was a yarn that I wanted to knit perhaps a lot of garments out of, so all of that information is useful for future knitting. I knit mine out of Purl Soho's linen quill fingering weight, and let's see if I have a tag here. Should have lots of tags here. This one's kind of crinkly. Maybe this one's better. Here is the tag. It is 50% fine Highland wool, 35% alpaca, and 15% linen. 439 yards for 100 grams. It is not superwash. The main color I used lavender opal, and then the contrast color I used peachy pink. Oh, there you go. I think when in the sun it gets kind of blown out. You can't see it as well. But, oh, I love it so much. It is drapey and airy. Still probably too warm to wear once it hits, 75 or something. But it is so comfortable. It's so lightweight. It is just as I imagined. So after I did a bunch of different swatches, I kind of had to figure out, okay, what is my new gauge and which size should I knit to fit the gauge and the fit that I'm looking for. And I ended up using, I think the pattern just calls for one needle size, US 4 or 3.5 millimeter, which I found that to be really too small on DK, for like DK weight yarn, for me personally. That would hurt my hands. I didn't want to do that. I feel like DK weight I like to knit on US 6 or 7s, and so US 4 was going to be way too small for me. So I thought, okay, well that shouldn't be too much to change if I'm going to change it to fingering weight. So my gauge did end up being slightly different, and I ended up using needle sizes, I think 3, 4, and 5. So what I did was I cast on, I just followed, and then I followed size 2 for the pattern. And based on that, I should result in like 3 to 4 inches of positive ease. And I think I got that. I might have blocked it out even wider because there's some wiggle room when you block it out, but I did want there to be positive ease. So the pattern, I think, might have given also body length, cropped or full length, and I ended up knitting to a length in between there. So my hip is here, and the end of the sweater is maybe a couple inches past that. So with my new gauge, I just followed the pattern for size 2, and then for anything that asked me to knit to a certain length, I just went based off of my new gauge. So for example, if I have 36 rounds for 4 inches and the pattern says knit to, 12 inches, then I'm going to multiply 36 by 3 to figure out how many rounds I need to knit to. And what else? I think there was short row shaping that used Japanese wrap and turns. I used German short rows, and I don't think I changed anything else really. For my needle sizes. So I started with a size 4. Usually I do my ribbing in 1 or 2 needle sizes smaller, but I didn't do that here because I was concerned that I could potentially get too tight of a neckline since I was following the pattern for a size 2, but not changing my needle sizes. So the pattern, the whole thing is written for using US 4s, but I decided to do my ribbing here in a 4. And then when I got to my colorwork section, I used a US 5. And I have found in the past, like more recently, I think my colorwork gauge has loosened up a lot. I don't know if it's me overcompensating to make sure I don't have tight floats, but I'm not sure I necessarily have to go up a needle size anymore for doing color work. But I did that here because I was concerned that it could potentially get tight since I was switching to fingering weight instead of DK weight. So it has a potential to shrink up a little bit, like the spacing between my yarns, my stitches, could get smaller. If that, I don't know if I'm explaining that very well, but I would rather err on the side of slightly looser than tight since I was already sizing down my, not sizing down, since I was changing my yarn, I just didn't want to go there, okay? I didn't want it to be too small. So I went up a needle size, and then when I got back down to the stockinette for the body, I went back down to a US 4, and then when I did my ribbing for the body, I went to a US 3. Now for my sleeves, I decided to knit those on a US 5 because sometimes if you knit on smaller circumferences, your gauge can be tighter. Now again, I'm thinking that my gauge does not necessarily get tighter on the sleeves. I think if I do magic loop, it does, but if I use small circulars, then it doesn't. I have been knitting sleeves on my blue ChiaoGoo interchangeables when possible. I think the sizing on there is US 4 to a US 8, so if it falls within that, I try to use those because I find it really quick. It's kind of just like knitting socks. I don't have it necessarily on like a 9-inch cable, or not 9-inch cable, but like a total of 9 inches, including the needles. I will switch out the cable length as I need to, depending on the circumference of the sleeve. That interchangeable set does come with like a shorter tip and a longer tip, and then 3 cable sizes. And I did purchase an additional set of those 3 same cable sizes so that if I want to knit my sleeves 2 at a time separately, like on their own cables, I can. So basically, once I got to the sleeves, I divided my remaining yarn in half, and then I had my needles, like one short, one long, on, let's say, the 6-inch cable length or the 8-inch cable length, and then I could do that on this side and then also have one short, one long needle, same length cable on the other side. And that would help me kind of progress throughout, and then when I would try it on for length, both sides would have like equal weight or equal, the same type of fit throughout, so I'm not like guessing. But yeah, so it worked out really well. And then for the bind off, then I went to US 4, and then I always not bind off, sorry. For my ribbing, I used a US 4 because my main fabric on my sleeve was a US 5. And then when I bind off, I bound off in pattern, but I always use a DPN in my right hand that's at least 1 or 2 sizes bigger than the needle I was knitting with so that my bind offs don't get too tight. I feel like when I was first knitting garments, my bind off was always too tight, and I would either redo it or just be not satisfied with that bind off because it would just be tight, and nobody likes a tight bind off. It just doesn't feel good. So I would rather air it on the stretchier side than too tight. So my sleeve did end up a little bit longer maybe than anticipated, but proportionally I have longer arms, so I feel like most commercial sweaters, the sleeves are always pretty slit length, if not shorter, just because that's just how they are for whatever size I'm wearing. But when you make your own sweaters, you can make the sleeves as long or short as you want to. And I just find this so cozy. They're a little bit longer, and if I pull them a little, it's not necessarily pulling at the yoke or the neck because the sleeves are plenty long. And they're easy to push up, and they still stay pretty up because the sleeve is a little more fitted than some sweaters I have knit in the past. I feel like generally, I won't do any decreasing, and I'll just knit a straight tube all the way down, do a couple rapid decreases before I do a sleeve cuff. But for this one, I decided to do a tapered sleeve. I think I followed the instructions for the full length sleeve tapering, like decreasing, and then just was mindful of my gauge as well. And then I just the night. I think that got me to like maybe just past the elbow, and then I just knit a straight tube all the way down. And I did not do any decreasing before the cuffs. I probably could have if I don't want it loose, but I feel like I want a little more airflow in this, so a little loose is okay. The main color ended up using almost 190 grams, and then the contrast color I used about 30 grams. So I love it. It is so comfy, and I think I will adjust the camera now so that I can show you what I'm wearing with it, which will be my next finished project to talk about. All right, the next set, I suppose, of finished projects I want to share with you are pants that I've sewn. The pattern is by Janet Celeste, and they're called the Tyler Trousers. And if successful, I will have footage here on the screen of me maybe a little bit farther away from the camera so that maybe you can see the pants better, at least the top part of it. I don't think I've shared sewn like bottoms on this channel before, and since everything is generally horizontal or landscape view, it makes it difficult to share anything like on a second half. Like socks, you can just hold up, right? But pants, I don't know how you're supposed to share pants. Anyway, so I sewed actually 3 pairs of these Tyler trousers, and I love them. Let's give a little backstory here. So when I was younger, I rarely wore jeans. I'm pretty sure I didn't wear jeans until maybe junior high or high school, and that was probably just because everybody else was wearing jeans. And I'm not generally one to fall into like trends or anything like that, but you know, when you're in junior high and middle school, you kind of, feel the pressure to wear what everybody else is wearing. Although I take that back, because I definitely wore stuff that nobody else was wearing. I had a pair of like hot pink corduroy overalls. I'm pretty sure I wore those in like middle school and junior high. And I'm pretty sure nobody else was wearing hot pink corduroy overalls. That was just a me thing. Anyway, I digress. So yeah, I just didn't wear jeans, didn't find them comfortable, just found them annoying. I think I wore leggings most of the time, or I wore elastic waisted pants all the time. And you know what? We've come full circle. I'm still doing that. I guess I never let them go. I was still, obviously different pairs, but I've always worn elastic waisted pants, and at some point I probably was wearing more like tailored pants to work and like office setting type of wear. But I do think that elastic waisted or looser fitting pants have a better place in my wardrobe and my life, and I feel like in general looser clothing fits better into just like regular wear, because it's more, I don't want to say forgiving, because there's no like guilt or anything like that involved. It's more, it doesn't really adapt. What's the word I'm thinking of? I think it just fits better in some ways with the human body that's like ever changing, right? So whether you gain a few pounds or lose a few pounds, or you become more muscular or you lose muscle, or whatever the case may be, the human body is always changing, and day to day, week to week, month to month, all the time. And to have pieces in my wardrobe that last throughout the years, the ones that tend to stay are the ones that are looser fitting, elastic waisted, bigger, flowier dresses type of things. And when I look in my closet, those are the pieces that have stayed, and they may be 10 years old and they're still just fine. And so I feel like jeans can kind of come and go, or don't fit right anymore, or your body changes after you have kids, or just all sorts of things. But the dresses that didn't quite have like a defined waistline, or, the elastic pant, the waisted pants, elastic waisted skirts, A-line skirts, all of those have stayed. Another thing that drew me to this particular pattern is that it is considered a zero waste pattern, which means when you purchase your fabric, it's like a big rectangle, right? And it uses the fabric in a way that you're not cutting out like curves and all these separate different pattern pieces where you have a bunch of scraps left over. And I really, really like that. I think part of what draws me to that is my mom sews, and I think that's kind of how she taught me to sew too, without calling it anything like zero waste sewing or whatever. You just basically make the most of what you have. And it's the same as if you're like cutting out something from construction paper. You know, you cut from the edge, not right from the center. And that way you have less waste, right? And then you can use that paper for something else. So similarly with this pattern, depending on the width of your fabric that's starting out, you may have like a long rectangle left over at the end because of how you've had to cut out, but at least it's still more or less a piece that you can use for something else. So with these trousers, I can't remember how many total sizes it comes in. Let me pull it up real quick so I can tell you those details. Okay, the pattern includes 22 different sizes, ranging from 33 to 66 inch hip circumference. And the recommendation is to select a finished hip circumference that is at least 2 inches larger than your hip measurement. So the idea is that the hips will be the widest part and the elastic waist will cinch it back in. And you need to be able to pull it up over your hips. And I went with the size D, which was a few inches. My hips are 35 inches. So then I went with, I think, 3 inches bigger, but I may have even gone a little bit bigger than that. And then the pattern also gives you ways to adjust the inseam and the pocket size and all of that. And something I really, really like is that you don't have like a million pages to print out for the pattern. There's one pattern piece and it is the pocket size. And that's something that has, in the past, like all of the, not in the past, currently too, printing out patterns has been a pain, really. Because you print out all of these computer-sized pages and then you have to tape them all together and then trace out your size or just cut it out or whatever. And if anything gets misaligned in those 40-something pages that you printed out, it doesn't match up. And not only that, you may be printing out pages where your size isn't even on there. And it's a waste of paper. Excuse me. It's a waste of paper. It's a waste of ink printing it out. And you could not do it that way and order it from like a pattern printing company type of thing where everything comes all ready to go. But even then you still, need to trace out your size. So I just find that a big hassle and honestly really annoying. And I know it's just how it goes, but it's also not how I grew up sewing. I didn't grow up sewing from patterns. I grew up sewing like self-drafting. And that's just how my mom taught me. So I was really excited to give this pattern a try, where I only had to print out the pocket piece. I think it was like 4 pages printed out and then easily taped together. And then I just traced out, I held it up to a window and I was able to trace it out, I think on one computer-sized paper. I had to maybe like cut an edge off that I didn't need, and then I just taped that to the bottom to like finish out the pocket. But it was very minimal printing, taping, all of that stuff. And I am really happy with the pattern. I had elastic on hand already. The pattern gives you different ways to adjust if you're going to use 1-inch elastic versus 2-inch elastic or whatever you decide to do. And I thought the pattern was really easy to follow. So hopefully I'll have inserted some pictures here on the side of the ones that I've made. I don't think I have pictures of the third one, the most recent one that I made yet, and that one I made cropped length. And the reason I did that is because I had 2 yards of fabric, and so my pieces are going to be a little bit shorter, and I thought this will be just fine. It's the fabric I'm using is the Kaufman Essex yarn dyed linen, I think. It's linen cotton blend. And I made the first 2 full length because I had enough yardage. I'd initially bought that fabric to make a dress, but honestly I chickened out. Too many pattern pieces, and if the bodice doesn't fit just right, then it just looks weird, and if it looks weird, I'm just not gonna wear it. If I'm not gonna wear it, it's a waste of fabric. So, chickened out and made the best decision ever to make these pants instead that I will wear constantly. So I made them all slightly different. This one, that I'm wearing, which I don't know why I'm even standing up to show you because you can't see anything, was my first pair, and I used the 1-inch elastic. I left the pockets as they are, so they're actually really long. I probably could have cut off a few inches, but they are great because I can stick my whole hand in there up to my wrist. And then the second pair I made are purple, and those ones I did cut the pocket down a little bit, and the waist I used 1 5/8 inch elastic, and so I adjusted things per the pattern. And then the third one I made is like a very dusty pinky color, and that one is slightly cropped. I think it hits maybe mid-calf, maybe. And that one I also used 1 5/8 inch elastic, and I also shortened the pockets on that one. And the fit of all of these is so good. And I can wear them at my natural waist or slightly lower if I want to. And I just highly recommend this pattern if you want to give it a try. I have a serger, so let's see if I can show you my, So the inside, instead of like folding it in and then folding it again for the hem, I just did it once because I used a serger for those raw edges. There is a YouTube video that Janet put up where if you don't have a serger or you want to hide any of those raw edges, she shows you how to do that. I just didn't do that because I didn't feel the need to. If you don't have a sewing machine, I actually think you could do this by hand. I don't regularly sew by hand unless it's something really small, but I do think that, you know, if you can sew in straight lines, you can totally sew it by hand. The pockets, I guess you sew a curve along the bottom, and there are some curves involved, but I think when you sew by hand, you actually have more control in sewing those curves than you do by a machine, unless you're more experienced or just kind of know your foot tension on the pedal and just go slowly around that. But I do think this is a great beginner's pattern. I personally do not strive for complicated patterns. I don't even know if I would call myself an adventurous beginner sewist. I don't want to be adventurous. I just want to do the stuff that's like simple, not complicated, versatile, functional, and I will just wear it all the time. That's what I want. I don't want anything complicated. I don't want to have to be adventurous. I just want something to fit that criteria, and I am all set. So I do have another finished project, but I can't share it with you yet because it is the Color Story tee that I have tested for Tiff Nealon, and that pattern will be coming out soon. So I probably will have finished project photos on my Instagram at edible.thoughts.makes. The link is down in the description box below this video. The photos will probably be up there before I get a chance to talk about it here on my YouTube channel. So if you are curious, keep an eye out there. The pattern is not released yet, but it will be released soon. So if you are curious on what mine looks like as a finished result and how I've styled it, I would keep an eye on my Instagram. If you are not on Instagram, you can just stay tuned for the next episode here. I will wear it and talk about it then. So let's go on to works in progress. As far as works in progress goes, I don't have a ton to share with you because I finished a bunch of things. And I definitely spent a lot of time finishing this Sonder jumper because I really was excited to wear it, being a fingering weight sweater. But I had alluded to this next project in my previous episode. It is my 4th half and half triangles wrap. It is a pattern by Purl Soho. It is a free pattern. I am using the recommended yarn in it, which is Purl Soho's Linen Quill. And the first color that I'm using is actually this peachy pink that I used in this yoke. So if you want to learn more about my thought process behind my version of the half and half triangles wrap, I would recommend you go back to the previous episode where I talked about one that I had recently finished. I will link to that episode here on the screen and probably in the description box below. But the way I purchase for this project is I purchased 2 skeins of each color, and I cast on less stitches than the large size and more stitches than the small size in the pattern. Now this time, because I purchased the 2 skeins of the peachy pink, I'll show you the color here on the screen. It is this beautifully vibrant, kind of neon pastel-y, not pastel like soft pastel with a lot of white in it, but pastel meaning like more of a muted neon, maybe, I don't know. But because I broke into that first skein to use for the color work here, I had slightly less yarn remaining that I knew I would need to cast on what I typically cast on, which is 230 stitches, which is in between the small and large size per pattern. So I decided to cast on 220 stitches and just see what happens. If I run out of yarn at the end, I may be putting a call out for anybody who has 5 or 10 grams of this color that I can purchase from them. But we will see. I play Yarn Chicken a lot, which I like to call calculated yarn management. But the difficult thing with this particular project is it's hard to count because it isn't necessarily linear. You cast on all your stitches to start. So you're kind of committed once you start. It's not like you can just stop when you're going to run out of yarn. And just the way the construction is, and you're doing short rows, the amount of yarn you use up isn't like, how do I describe it? It's just much harder to predict how much yarn you need for however many stitches you cast on. So I'm taking a risk and I'm doing 220 stitches with the yarn that I have, and this is where I am at. Here is what I have left of the first cake. I haven't weighed it, so I don't know where we're at with that. I'm using the US 3 needles called for in the pattern, and I'm using Addies, not the super sharp ones. Oh, I have the packaging in here. The original Addi Turbo. And usually I use ChiaoGoo needles for the majority of my projects, but when I was knitting my first half and half triangles wrap, I found the repetitive motion using the ChiaoGoos, it was hurting my fingers. It was just way too sharp on the tip, and it just wasn't as comfortable. And these Addies are much more blunt on the tip than the ChiaoGoos that I was using, and I find this very enjoyable. I am using a 40-inch cable, which I find plenty long. Some people like to use a 47-inch cable because they don't like their stitches all bunched up. By the time you get to the color change, the diagonal, that's the longest part of the wrap. So here is what I have so far. I'm just like a couple inches in, maybe 3 inches in. This Progress Keeper here is by Maria of Woolen Forest. Her Etsy shop is Forest Charm. And so is this stitch marker. It's a rose gold heart. Oops. With a little, I think it's rose quartz on there. And yeah, this is just a project that I pick up and put down whenever. I started this, I think, right at the end of April, as soon as I finished the last one. Maybe it was May 1st. And I think this is going to be my summer project. I have it paired with, this is going to be my brightest combo. I'm calling it Garden Bouquet for obvious to me reasons. I love a beautiful garden. It makes me so happy. It's a burst of color, and I feel like it fills you up for the coming quiet months of winter. So here's my second color. Are you ready? You know what? I'm going to hold it up with the other one. That's bright, right? This is Pink Pop, and it is as bright as it looks. It is a neon pink, and I just think these two together actually tone each other down. Even though they're both super bright, I don't know if it's because they're competing with each other, but in a good way. So on its own, I feel like I'm not sure I could wear this bubblegum hot pink color. It's not bubblegum, but it reminds me of a more candy-ish hot pink. And then this pink, this peachy pink, that's more orange, I think, than pink, looks bright on its own, and I wouldn't necessarily wear this on its own. But together, I'm a sucker for pink and orange together, and this just makes me so happy. It makes me think of all the zinnias that we have, and we have bleeding hearts in the garden, and it just makes me so happy. So I am so excited about this combo. It is going to be slightly smaller than the other ones that I have made, just slightly, at 220 stitches instead of 230. My first one I cast on 260. But I think this is going to be a great pop of color in the winter when it's so gray and I just need that color. And being slightly smaller, I think it will be a little more wearable in the winter, I mean not winter, in the summer for like those cool mornings or cooler evenings. I'm just really excited about this combo. So we are on to the Eats and Reads section. I have read a ton of books in the last couple of weeks. As I mentioned before, I am that person that starts a book, and if it's really good, I have a really hard time putting it down. And though sleep is really important to me as a functioning human being, I sometimes go way past my bedtime to read more in a book. So I have read, I think, four books in the last couple of weeks. The first one, actually, I'm not going to go in any sort of chronological order because A, it doesn't matter, and B, I don't remember. So one of the books that I read is The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea by Axie O, and I think it falls under YA fiction. And let me just pull up some notes I have for that. It is a retelling of Korean mythology, and I fell in love with it. It is like an easy read in the sense that like there's not like a lot of complicated hard words, or it's not like super, I can't think of the word. I guess all I can say is that it isn't like another book that I read that was hard like emotionally to read. So it painted like beautiful imagery and you fell in love with the characters, and I am no good at book summaries or book reviews, so that is not not where I'm going with this. But I just wanted to say that if you enjoy Korean mythology, YA, sci-fi fantasy type of books, that you might want to check this one out. And the cover is just beautiful. I will have flashed the cover here on the screen hopefully so that you can see it. The next book that I read was A Long Petal of the Sea, and that's by Isabel Allende, a Chilean-American author. And, and the previous one, Axie O, she's a Korean-American author. So A Long Petal of the Sea was like heart-wrenching. It's so good, as all of Isabel Allende's works are. And it's just like, it just like gets at you. It starts in the late 1930s with a civil war in Spain, and it follows, as a lot of her books do, like generations through families and what's happening historically and what's happening within the family and how it's affecting everything, and just like social, political commentary on things as well. And she just does such a good job of doing that. And there's a lot of talk of like hope, but within exile, and like there's of course love, and also talking about your feelings of belonging, and it's really good. So if that's something that interests you, I highly recommend it. It's a longer book. I don't know how many pages. I don't know if it says here. Anyway, it is more like gut-wrenching, heartbreaking than the previous book that I was telling you about, but it is really good. I think some of these books you kind of have to be in a certain mood for it, otherwise it can be like too hard to read, but at the same time I feel like those realities are things that we need to not be numb to. So reading about those historical events, which some may feel more real these days than maybe you imagined before, I just think it's important to read and understand, and Isabel Allende just does such a good job of her writing style is something I really, really enjoy. Okay, next book that I read was, let me pull it up here. Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Sue Lynn Tan. And that book just came out this year, and it's a duology, and the second book doesn't come out till November. Why did I do this to myself? This book was also so good. I don't know if this one would count as YA or not. It's about 500 pages, and I really enjoyed it. The author, she's Malaysian, but I can't remember where she lives currently. But, oh, okay, well, here it says it's considered a young adult fantasy novel. It's inspired by Chinese mythology, so if you like that, it might be up your alley. And I fell in love with the characters, the world building, the like emotions involved, and there are, I can't remember how many parts, like there's chapters, but there's like parts to the book, and at the end of it, I mean, this probably could have almost been a book on its own, or even separated into 2 books or however way. But so I'm really curious what the second book of the duology is going to be about, since this one seemed to have so much in it. I felt like the action was well paced, as well as the character building, and I just really enjoyed this book. It was a really good read. The last book, I can't remember if I mentioned City Spies last time, and that's like a middle school age read, and that's by James Ponti, and that one I think has 3 books out so far. I don't know, you know what, I don't know if there are more coming out, and I think when I read it last time, I might have only read the first one so far, and I was picking up the second one. I don't really remember, because it's like middle school reading level, and the font's slightly bigger. I read through them pretty quickly, so now I just can't remember what I talked about last time. But the second one I really liked. The second one is set in San Francisco, and I love San Francisco, and it was a fun read. And the third one I have picked up from the library, but I have not read it yet. I started it, and I just wasn't in the mood for it, I think, at the time, so then I read the other ones, but I will be coming back to it. I think the third one just came out. Yeah, the third one, called Forbidden City, came out in February of this year, 2022. So I'm not sure what's happening for future books, but I find those a really fun read. I especially like that the characters are from all over the world, and I think some of the things they talk about can still be relatable, even if you're not a spy, just from like a kid's perspective on the things that you have to be brave about, the things that you hold dear to your heart, and things that they have to work through, and the friendships that they make among each other. But yeah, I think it's really good. Okay, I think that is it. I feel like I talked a mile a minute here, and I am so sorry if I talked your ear off. There is an option to slow down or speed up YouTube videos, but I suppose that advice is neither here nor there, because this is the end of the video, and hopefully you knew that already if you needed to slow it down or speed it up. But yeah, I think that's everything that I wanted to share with you. Maybe the sun is waking me up out of hibernation, and I am just ready to go. But yeah, I think that is it. I would love to hear about what you're reading or making, or maybe you've read some of the same books that I have read, and I'd love to hear what you think about them, and maybe what you're interested in doing this summer. I feel like we're gonna be pretty busy this summer, so I'm kind of curious how my scheduling of videos is gonna work out. I have been recording kind of every 2 weeks for the last several months, and I'm not entirely sure how that's going to work out for the summer, because once the kids are off school, we do have various activities planned, but they will be home with me all the time, and the activities are, you know, an hour here or there, kind of all over the place. So yeah, I'm just gonna go with the flow like I typically do, and we will see what happens. So I'm hoping to hop back on here once or twice before our summer officially starts, and then after that, I don't know, we'll see. Maybe it'll be a monthly thing, or maybe more informal. I don't know. Well, anyway, until the next time we chat, cheers to being creative, and I will talk to you next time. Bye.